Okay, this is Ken Kolkelbeck, University of Illinois. Welcome to day two, round two of the Midwest Poultry Federation convention slash virtual presentations. And we're in the lunchtime learning focus on August 13th here on Thursday. And we've got two speakers going to talk today. As well as on a third presentation, it will be a video, so you will see that coming up at the third of this session. So our first speaker is Dustin Baker from Commodity Ingredient Hedging. And basically he's going to go over some agribusiness outlook, grain market outlook, et cetera, in the face of COVID-19 and what that means for agribusiness. And so we don't know what's going to happen long term, but short term, there was quite a bit of change and disruption in the market, ammo-wise and crop-wise, et cetera. And so he will review market fundamentals. And then, answer any questions after his presentation. We'll look at the Q&A at that time. So, Dustin, you can take off.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction and appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you today. I think we all understand that buyers face significant risk in the event of crop failures or some major demand disruptor. And even though price management might sound kind of silly at today's prices, it does remain vitally important to the long-term success of many agribusinesses, including poultry and egg producers. So I think today we're going to try to get an understanding of the backdrop against which we're operating. We know that we got off to a really favorable start in terms of, growing conditions and planting. But by and large, a true bullish fundamental has remained elusive on both the corn and the soybean meal side of things. So before we get into things, I think it's important, I don't want this to be a commercial, but just a little bit of background on Commodity and Ingredient Hedging, or CIH. We're based in Chicago. We do have a field office in Des Moines. We've got about 80 employees, and we work with agribusinesses, whether it's farms or food companies, and help them manage risk. So that looks different depending on the commodity that we're talking about. Of course, on the poultry and egg producers, we mostly work with them on the input side of the business because there's not a futures traded equivalent on the output side or the revenue side of the business. Now, we've got clients across the country and really across the Western Hemisphere. And we have a three-pronged approach to the business that includes consulting, brokerage, and education. I serve on the education team, and so we help conduct research for the rest of our team members and our clients, as well as put on classes for clients and prospects to help them understand the tools that are available out there to help manage their margins or manage their risk, and begin to understand, how and when those would be best applied. I guess it's time to kind of move into things. We'll start off talking about corn. I think really we should begin focusing on the old crop fundamentals before we get into the crop that we're about to harvest this fall. Now, by and large, the story's already written here, right? The marketing year begins September 1st, runs through the end of August. So we're basically done with old crop in terms of storylines, but I think it kind of sets the stage for what we're looking at throughout the rest of the year. I think one of the important places to start is really looking at ethanol. So here on the screen, on the left, we've got weekly ethanol production, and on the right, we've got weekly ethanol stocks. Now, the blue solid line is 2020. The red solid line is 2019, so a year ago. And the dotted green line at the top is a 10-year high, and the dotted red line at the bottom is a 10-year low. What's interesting to look at here is you can really see the impact that stay-at-home orders had on, first of all, gasoline consumption, and as a second round impact, on the incentive to produce ethanol. You can see over on the left chart there the significant decrease in ethanol production that we had Now, we've rallied about 75% over the last 12 weeks in terms of production, but you can see that the production is really starting to flatten out again and starting to plateau. Over on the stock side of things, we were at all-time highs of ethanol stocks back at the beginning of the COVID crisis. Now that's come down a bit, closer to the 10-year average. And partially that's because people are driving more, but also it's because, we're just simply not producing as much as we once were. So not a real bullish story here on the ethanol side of things, especially when we have major driving states like California, Florida, Texas, really that whole Sun Belt dealing with increasing COVID cases. You couple that with the fact that China recently indicated that they're giving up on using a 10% blend for their gasoline needs. Ethanol was part of the U.S.-China Phase 1 trade agreement that was agreed to earlier this year. The fact that they're now stepping away from ethanol definitely doesn't bode well in terms of, the potential for exports there. So not a real bullish story here. If we look at exports, again, the story is almost written for old crop. We'll look at what it means for new crop. But if we look at old crop here on this chart, we've got weekly export shipments in the blue bars. Now the gray shaded area behind is the pace needed historically to meet USDA's projections for the year. And then the solid green line we have here is how far ahead or behind of that projection we are. So you can see that we're entering the end of the crop year. We're still 117 million bushels behind what USDA expected us to be shipping out for the year. And this is despite some pretty solid weeks here throughout the summer. So, we've had a good recent couple weeks here, but overall we're behind where we thought we'd be at the beginning of the year from an export standpoint. So what does this mean? Well, our stocks are pretty large. Here on the left, we've got annual corn stocks, depending on the time frame. So we get these numbers quarterly from USDA. You can see in yellow, we've got June 1 corn stocks over time. You can see even though we weren't at an all-time high back on June 1, we were near an all-time high. If we look over on the right, we can see it more in perspective of that 10-year range, well above average in June. Almost a high. We'd expect to be in a similar range there come September 1. We'll get new numbers at the end of September. But overall, there's plenty of corn out there. Supplies are very adequate at this time. And this is before we're even looking at the crop that we're about to harvest. So we know that. What about new crop? If we kind of switch gears here and look at the crop that's already been planted and that we're about to harvest, story's kind of similar. We have a whole lot of supply coming our way. We had a major report from USDA released yesterday. It was the August WASDE report. Now the August WASDE incorporates satellite data to determine their yields as well as farmer surveys. It does not incorporate USDA enumerator data. That'll be included in September. So kind of all eyes are shifting to that September report coming out. But if we look, USDA is expecting 92 million acres to have been planted. Now this is a reduction from what they said earlier in the spring of 97 million acres. So a reduction of 5 million acres is pretty significant. But we're looking at 92 million acres of corn. You can see it's higher than the last 3 years. It's closer to an average maybe over the last 10. So plenty of acres out there, and really those acres were occurring, fence row to fence row. Really across the country, we're seeing a whole lot of corn being planted this spring. If we look at how that corn is coming along, as of Sunday, 71% of the crop was rated good to excellent. Now it was a little bit worse than the week before, but last year we were at 57% good to excellent. So we're ahead of where we were a year ago. We're ahead of the 5-year average. There's some potential issues popping up here. Of course, the Eastern Seaboard, you can see in Colorado some issues there. Iowa has been dealing with a decent amount of dryness throughout most of the summer. They're still ahead of the 5-year average, but they were rated 69% good to excellent. It'll be really interesting to see what happens come Sunday and if we see any impact in the derecho or what that impact will be from that large storm that moved throughout the Corn Belt, particularly hitting Iowa earlier this week. We've seen pictures of down corn. There's wild estimates of how large of an impact that is. So hopefully we get a little more data come Monday when that report is released. But overall, the crop's looking pretty good. What does that mean from a yield perspective? Well, USDA yesterday in their report increased their expected yield by over 3 bushels to 181.8 bushels an acre. You can see this chart goes back to 1959-60. Of course, that's going to be an all-time record if realized. Significant increase from last year. So we've got a lot of acres. We got a really high yield. We're looking at really large supplies coming to the market come this fall. What does this mean from a demand standpoint? Well, export sales are going pretty well so far. USDA increased their expectation of exports throughout the next year in the report yesterday. Here, this chart looks at the export sales pace. So this is looking at of the amount that USDA expects the U.S. to export of corn throughout the next crop year. How much have we already sold at this point, and how does that compare to previous years? Now you can see green would be the 10-year high, red would be the 10-year low. The gray line in the middle is the average. You can see that for next year's corn, we've already sold 19.23% of the expected exports. On average, we're less than 15%. So it's a really strong forward sales pace that we're on right now, indicating good demand for the product, which would make sense given where prices have been. Now, a lot of this has to do with Chinese purchases. And we'll see if that comes to fruition, but they've literally been buying corn that is off the charts. So we'll see if that continues or if this is more of a blip as a result of flooding in China. Now, if we look at domestic corn use for feed, we can see, going back again to the 1959-60 crop year, we're looking at potentially the third highest corn use for feed that we've ever had at 150.5 million bushels. So you can really see the stair step that we've been on higher ever since the drought back in 2012 and 13. Again, third highest on record for corn use for feed. We can see so far this year, as we look at animal production, of course, weekly pork and beef production on the left, chicken and turkey on the right. We're by and large making up ground that we saw from supply disruptions back, or supply chain disruptions back in April and May. Pork is actually ahead of schedule from a year ago. Beef is making up ground. Looking through the end of the year, we'll get another hogs and pigs report in September, which should show a lot of pigs on the ground. The July cattle inventory report indicated there's a whole lot of cattle out there too. So we're looking at a lot of animal production and a lot of demand for new crop corn coming up. So what does this mean for stocks? Well, stocks are looking pretty large, all-time high. They were increased yesterday again by USDA. There's plenty of corn out there, and there will be plenty of corn out there throughout the rest of the year. For a stocks-to-use ratio, we're looking at the highest level since 2004 and 5 at 19%. So, these are all great to know fundamentals, but what does this mean from a pricing perspective? Well, if we look at the December corn contract, here I've got over time since this started trading at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, December corn has traded in a range of a low of 320 up to a high of 424. Now, last night, the market closed at 327 and a quarter. Of course, today markets have kind of gone wild, so this is now stale. But based on last night's close, you can see that just looking at the chart, it would appear as though it's a good level to be purchasing December corn at, which is true. But quite often we get asked by our clients, is this good or is this bad? And, that's a relatively subjective measure, and a measure that we like to talk about more is more of an objective measure and say, well, rather than good or bad, let's talk about how common or rare of an opportunity there is to purchase corn at 327. And one of the tools that we use to do that is looking at percentiles. So here we've got a lot of numbers on the screen, but I'll draw your attention right across the top to December 20 futures contract price of 327. Again, that's where we closed last night. Now, each one of these columns represents a different time frame. For example, if we focus here on the middle, we're looking at the 5-year time frame. So this is the price of 327 is at basically the first percentile. Now, if we look below that box that I've highlighted, we can see a range over the last 5 years for December corn from a high of 469 down to a low of 316. That means that over the last 5 years, less than 1% of the time, the price has been below 327. 99.1% of the time, the price has been above 327. So if you were able to purchase corn at 327 over the last 5 years, you'd probably be pretty happy with yourself. We look at the 10-year time frame, it's still, a similar story. Now, this isn't to say that the price won't move below 316. I would argue that this is probably a pretty unique year given all the different circumstances. But, this begins the conversation of, should we be protecting this price? And if so, how should we do so? We have some clients that are happy with 327 and go out and buy the board right away. We have other clients who, for one reason or another, might be more interested in drawing a line in the sand, saying, I don't want to pay more than this price, but I want to participate if markets happen to move lower. For those clients, we tend to shift focus toward a long call. As of last night, you could buy a December 2020 call option, a 320 call for 17 cents a bushel. So what does that mean? Well, a call option gives the owner the right but not the obligation to purchase corn at a specific price, in this case 320. Now, in order to have that right, you have to pay an upfront premium, in this case 17 cents. So what does that mean? Well, it means that anytime the market moves above 320 between now and December, your price for those bushels is going to be $3.20 plus a 17-cent cost. If the market happens to move lower than 320 between now and December, your price will be whatever the market's at plus your 17-cent cost. You can see over here on the right, I've got some numbers here in a table. You can see the hypothetical futures price at expiration from a range of 520 down to 120. If we look in that middle column, the net price, you can see that anytime the market moves higher, say up to $4, if the future's at $4, your net price is $3.37 because you have the right to buy at $3.20. You add the 17 cents of the premium cost, your net price would never be worse than $3.37. The nice thing about this is if it happens to move lower, you participate in that movement lower, say down to say 260, your net price would be 277. Your option would expire worthless, get a 17-cent cost into that. You participated in the movement downward. Now, of course, the 17 cents might scare people off. From a historical perspective, we can look at implied volatility and tell you that this is a relatively cheap option at this point. But there are other strategies that involve selling options in order to bring in premium and cheapen up the overall cost of the strategy. And those are strategies that we're happy to speak about offline and look forward to those conversations. But that's really from a corn perspective. If we shift gears now and look at the soybean fundamentals, again, I think it makes sense to start off focusing on the old crop before we move into the crop that we're about to harvest this fall. There's been great demand for old crops. If we look at the soybean crush, we're 4.2% ahead of where we were a year ago from September through June. Again, similar to corn use for feed, we've been on this stair-step higher really since the flood. That's reflective of the growth in protein production domestically and protein consumption around the world. So if we look at exports of old crop, this reads similarly to the corn chart that I had up, wherein the blue bars are weekly export sales of soybeans. The gray represents the historical pace needed to meet USDA's expectation, and the green line is how far ahead or behind we are of USDA's forecast. You can see that we're 101 million bushels behind USDA's forecast, and as we're getting here toward the end of the marketing year. One thing that I think is also, and that's despite some pretty strong weeks here recently, also just interesting to see the seasonality that is exhibited in soybean exports, where in the early part of the crop year, when we have fresh soybeans coming off the field, is when China tends to focus on the U.S. as a source of soybeans. As we move into the winter and Brazilian soybeans become kind of the focus of Chinese demand, which is where we're at right now. Typically, they source their soybeans throughout the summer and early fall from South American sources. So what does this mean from a stocks perspective? Again, similar story to corn, wherein there's not a huge bullish fundamental. You can see that while stocks on June 1 were down 22% from a year ago, they're still higher than average, and quite a bit higher than average. Now, the indicated disappearance from March through May was 8% lower than the previous year. So, yeah, they're better than where they were last year, but keep in mind, last year they're, once again, literally off the charts. So we have got an awful lot of soybeans on the ground to chew through. We'll get an update of this at the end of September as well. Now, if we look at new crop soybean, again, kind of similar story to the corn. Yesterday in the WASI report, the balance sheet called for higher production, use, and ending stocks. So even though they increased usage, they increased the supply by more, ultimately driving higher the ending stocks. If we look at total planted acreage, we're looking at almost 84 million acres. Again, big increase from where we were a year ago. Keep in mind, a year ago, of course, we had prevent plant, we had flooding, we had major issues, coupled with the threat of, or the reality of retaliatory tariffs for our largest customer. So we're back closer to a long-term average here. The soybean crop is coming along really well. We got a really early start to it. We've got pretty good pod setting throughout the country. 74% of the crop was rated good to excellent on Monday. That's the highest rating for the year so far, and it was the highest score for that week since 1994. So we're looking at a really, really good crop so far. USDA reflected that in their yield estimates yesterday, looking at 53.3 bushels an acre. That would, of course, be an all-time record, and this was actually higher than the range of estimates that analysts were expecting before the report came out. So we're looking at a whole lot of soybeans as well coming our way. We look at the export sales pace so far, again, similar to the corn chart here, where on average at this point we've sold almost 24% of the expected exports for the next marketing year. So far this year we're at 26%. So again, higher than normal. We've seen some really good sales to China recently, so hopefully we'll see those come through. We can see overall U.S. soybean exports and see the impact that the retaliatory tariffs we faced in China had over the last 2 marketing years. USDA increased their forecast yesterday, something closer to what we saw in 2016 and 17. Of course, soybeans is all China all the time. If we look at overall Chinese soybean imports, USDA increased their expectations slightly from a year ago. Overall soybean meal demand in China is expected to increase about 7 to 8% year over year. So, that is reflecting a number of things, not the least of which is their recovery from African swine fever that decimated their swine herd. As they rebuild their pig inventory, that definitely increases the demand for soybean meal there. So overall, U.S. soybean ending stocks expected to be pretty similar to where they were a year ago. So slightly different than corn, where in corn we're looking at record stocks at the end of the year. Here we're looking at still elevated stocks from a historical perspective, but definitely a little bit better than where we were 2 years ago. So from a pricing standpoint, where does that put us? Well, here we can look at December 2020 soybean meal price history. Again, since the end of 2017, beginning in 2018 through last night, we've seen a high of 348 and a low of 287, let's call it. Last night we closed at 290. Of course, today, after I already made these charts, today the market was $9 higher from what I saw right before I jumped on here. So this has changed. But again, you can tell just by looking at the chart that this is a pretty good price level from a historical perspective for this contract. But from a objective standpoint, how common or rare of an opportunity is this? Well, again, we'll look at percentiles. We focus on the middle there. Over the last 5 years, we're at about the 6th percentile. You can see over the last 5 years, we had a low of 268.80 and a high of 409. So 6% of the time, the price has been lower than where we're at today. And 94% of the time, it's been higher. If we look at a longer time frame over the last 10 years, we're at about the 4th percentile. So again, this is telling you that this is probably a price level that's worth protecting in some way, and that's the first question. The second question is, okay, if you want coverage, then how would you like to structure that? Again, this will depend on each individual risk profile, but we have a number of clients that are interested in putting coverage on, but making sure that it's flexible. And again, that's where the long call comes in. It's a pretty straightforward and simple strategy, but again, last night could have bought a 290 call for about $8 a ton. That would be drawing a line in the sand that's saying, if December meal is above 290, my price is set at 290, add in the $8 premium, I will not pay more than 298 for corn or for my meal in December. Flip side of that, of course, is if the market moves down to say 280, you participate in that, your price is going to be 288. So you have unlimited protection to the higher prices. You just have to factor in the premium, but you also have the opportunity to participate in the lower prices if they should arrive between now and December. Again, they have an upfront premium cost, but I can tell you from a historical perspective, looking at implied volatility, which is one of the ways that we measure this, these are relatively cheap options at this point. Again, it can be combined with other strategies to cheapen up the overall cost, but whenever you do that, you're either giving up protection or giving up opportunity on one side or the other. But that's all I had to kind of run through the corn and soybean meal markets. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Ken to keep the ball moving here.
Great, Dustin. Thanks for your presentation. Excellent presentation. Let me just check the Q&A box, and we don't have anything at this time. Dustin, I did have just a general question. It looks like, at least here in central part of the U.S., looks like corn and soybean harvest this fall will be good to excellent, I think. And of course, that's going to drive prices, I guess, future prices down somewhat. Would you kind of agree to that, scenario?
That's what one would expect. Of course, there's a whole lot of factors that come into play in the marketplace, but one would expect that, we're going to have very large production, that increase in supply. Econ 101 would lead you to believe that prices would fall. I can tell you that today the corn market's up for December corn over 12 cents, almost 13 cents, and meal is up $9 right now for December. So sometimes the markets don't behave exactly the way that you would expect it to from an Econ 101 perspective, and I think that's why it's really important for our clients to not be predicting where the market's going to go necessarily, but have a plan in place such that when the market does move, you have something to implement. It doesn't matter so much what's causing it to move. It just matters that you have a plan in place to give yourself long enough runway to be able to make adjustments when it does move.
Great. Okay. That sounds good. Okay. Let's move on to our second speaker. Our second speaker today is Andrew Bish. He's the founder and CEO of Hemp Harvest Works, COO of Bish Enterprises in Nebraska. And basically, Hemp Harvest Works as a machinery sales business focused on bringing a complete line of equipment, ancillary solutions to hemp producers and or processors. He has focused lately on identifying and resolving issues currently facing hemp harvesting and processing. So, Andrew, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Yes, I think we can.
Great. So I'm going to depart from my normal day-to-day job and talk about an organization and how that organization can help with poultry, and that's going to be the Hemp Feed Coalition. So hello and welcome everyone to my presentation about our industry. I guess I should probably get to my slide here. There we go. Sorry about that. Today I'm going to walk through who we are as an organization, what our objectives are, and how our objectives can bring some very positive benefits to poultry producers and the poultry they produce here in the United States. So first I should introduce myself to you all. For those of you who are unfamiliar with me, my name is Andrew Bish, and like said before, I do operate two companies, Bish Enterprises and Hemp Harvest Works. Here's a couple photos of who I am and some of my experiences I've had in some of the stages, various stages of hemp plant processing. I actually started out working with grain and fiber varieties, and as you can see from the photo in the bottom, with my daughter in the bin of a combine before we got involved into some of the other commodities derived from the hemp plant. So the Hemp Feed Coalition. The Hemp Feed Coalition, or HFC, is composed of a diverse set of stakeholders across hemp, agricultural, supplement, animal production, pet and manufacturing industries, working together to gain approval for hemp as an animal feed ingredient. Our mission and vision statements are pretty straightforward. Our mission is to gain federal approval for hemp and its byproducts as animal feed and to create new markets. And our vision is to grow hemp producers and processors access to the billion-dollar animal feed and supplements market, creating a local supply chain from farmer to feeder. So why does anyone need the Hemp Feed Coalition? There are a few reasons for this. First and foremost, currently hemp products are not approved by AFCO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, or the FDA, Center for Veterinary Medicine, to be used in animal feed. Additionally, large-scale production of hemp will create byproducts that are nutritious and valuable as animal feed ingredients, and animals will become healthier and the size of the hemp market will increase exponentially. I guess before I get into why any of this matters to poultry producers, I'm going to share a little bit of info on the background and process that helps highlight the necessity of the HFC. So here's a quick background into the formation. So in 2017, the Colorado legislature directed the Colorado Department of Agriculture, also known as the CDA, to gather stakeholder input. Sorry, my slide's skipping around a little bit, on the inclusion of hemp in animal feeds. The stakeholder group analyzed the issues, barriers to legalization, and what could be done to overcome them. This information was then published in the Hemp and Animal Feed Report in 2018, which identified the pathway to legalization, including submission of an animal feed petition to the FDA-CVM, identifying gaps in research on nutritional benefits of hemp and hemp byproducts, and the HFC ultimately evolved out of this initial effort. Many of these people transitioned from the CDA stakeholder group to participate in the Hemp Feed Coalition itself. We currently have a limit of 13 on the coalition and a varying number of positions on various task forces. Here is a list of some of the groups that helped get the initial project up and going on this slide here. Today, the HFC is an industry-led coalition, including members from 18 states and Canada. This list includes veterinarians and university researchers, hemp industry advocates and experts, livestock associations, feed experts and formulators, animal feed retailers, and regulatories and policy experts. Here are some of the current goals of the HFC and its task force members. To monitor and promote feed studies and research, collaborate on the submission of a feed additive petition to the FDA CVM, creation of standards for hemp and its byproducts, provide industry updates and encourage advocacy in individual states, completion of feed ingredient definitions for hemp byproducts through AFCO, and the creation of local supply chains by connecting producer to processor to feed formulator. Here's a 2020 industry update. So a quick update of the activities and current projects underway at the HFC. This year we gathered 14 research proposals from 8 universities. We have facilitated private-public partnership with IND Hemp and Colorado State University to fund a lamb trial. We are finalizing the first ingredient definition for hemp seed meal as a protein source for chickens. Investigating hemp seed protein powder for the next ingredient. We are also considering which species will be targeted next, whether it be horses, fish, cattle, or dogs. And we are collaborating on the submission of a feed additive petition to the FDA CVM for hemp seed oil for dogs and cats. In addition to that, here are some current projects underway in a variety of states relative to hemp as animal feed. Colorado State University has a lamb study investigating hemp seed meal. This is pre-approved by the FDA CVM and funded by IND Hemp. The Wenger Group in Pennsylvania is doing a chicken feed study studying hemp seed meal to egg layers and has been pre-approved by the FDA CVM. North Carolina State University has developed research proposal for hemp seed meal for oil for horses. Pre-approval is the next step, and they are looking for funding. The University of Minnesota is considering a research proposal using hemp seed holes for swine. And the proposal approval and funding is needed. This has currently been postponed due to COVID-19. Unfortunately, and has engaged the Protein Innovation Lab and carbohydrate researcher to assist with hemp seed product characterization. North Dakota State is starting a research proposal for beef cattle trial using hemp seed meal for multiple classifications of beef cattle. Individuals for trial and meal has been donated, and some potential funding has been identified. And finally, the Kansas State University is working on the characterization of cannabinoids in feed, and specifically cannabinoid transference in animal feed and hemp byproducts. So now a quick look into the regulating process, starting with an overview. So feed is regulated at both the federal and state through a few channels. On the federal level, the USDA, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA regulates animal feed, and also the Center for Veterinary Medicine, also known as the CVM. On the state, that's typically done by the State Department of Agriculture, and there's also the Association of American Feed Control Officials, or AFCO, which is a non-regulatory body that promotes the uniform regulation of feed across the U.S. through model regulations and publishing feed ingredient definitions and terms. So this is a flow chart we put together to highlight the approval path for a food ingredient. As you can see, this is not very straightforward. So the pathway to ingredient approval for hemp and its byproducts is time-consuming and complicated. We created this infographic to identify key steps in the process. There are 2 ways to gain federal approval: through new ingredient definitions to AFCO, which still leads to the FDA CVM, or the submission of a feed additive petition directly to the FDA CVM. Currently, the HFC is focused on grain byproducts, and here are a few reasons why. The FDA is enthusiastic about approving seed and seed byproducts. Oilseed and their byproducts are common fed to animals, meal and cake. This creates new markets for hemp byproducts, and it has a very highly nutritious profile. Protein typically ranges from 25 to 45%, and fat from 10 to 24%. With all of that said, more peer-reviewed published research is needed, and the path for approval depends on proving nutrition value safety. Here are some details on the nutrition content of hemp seed. Hemp seed is high in oil and protein, is 80% polyunsaturated fat, and is high in linoleic acid and alpha-linoleic acid. Has omega-6 and omega-3 ratio between 2:1 and 3:1. The composition of oilseed nutrition. Here is a chart showing fatty acid composition of nut and seed oils. As you can see in this chart, when compared to many other nuts and seeds, hemp is high in linoleic acid, which is an omega-6, alpha-linoleic acid, omega-3, and even has a measurable amount of gamma-linoleic acid, omega-6, and a respectable amount of oleic acid, omega-9. Let's take a quick look at the animal feed potential in the U.S. 1 acre of hemp seed planted yields about 800 to 1,400 pounds of seed. The seed and grain segment of industrial hemp is expected to expand at a compound annual growth rate of 19.8% between 2020 and 2027. The animal care segment is expected to expand by 9.7% in the next 7 years. 190 million tons of animal feed produced in the U.S. every year, and to produce 10 million tons of seed cake would require producing 30 million tons of seed, which is approximately 30,000 acres when estimated at 1,000 pounds per acre. Now that we know who the HFC is and why we exist, what are we doing, the process for what we're doing, and the benefits to animals at large, and what's the benefit for poultry? Here are some of the results taken from a study done in March 2012 from the University of Manitoba, supported by a grant from the Poultry Industry Council and the Manitoba Science and Technology International Collaboration Fund, entitled "The Effect of Feeding Hemp Seed and Hemp Seed Oil on Laying Hen Performance and Egg Yolk Fatty Acid Content, Evidence of Their Safety and Efficacy for Laying Hen Diets." The study concluded that chickens with a 20% hemp seed diet produced higher egg weights than chickens without a hemp seed diet. A total egg yolk omega-3 fatty acid content increased linearly with increasing dietary alpha-linoleic acid from hemp seed or hemp seed oil diet additives. In summary, if you feed hemp seed to chickens, those chickens will produce eggs with higher weight and with greater omega-3 content. And while this study is fantastic, we must replicate these results here in the United States, a project that is underway, and submit these studies in order to obtain approval, despite the overwhelming evidence from studies produced in Canada, Europe, and Australia. Upcoming poultry hemp feed news. So exciting news relevant to poultry is that in August 2020, this month, the Hemp Feed Coalition intends to submit the first new ingredient definition to APCO for hemp seed cake and meal to be used as a protein supplement for broilers and layer chickens. While things are moving forward with chickens, there is more work to be done in that category as well as with other livestock. In order to continue to make the progress necessary, the HFC does need your help. Feed studies and the application process cost money, and here are some of the ways people can participate if they would like. So please consider a donation to help fund research, become an application champion. You can inexpensively become a friend of Hemp Feed Coalition by donating just $100 to the cause. We have sponsorships that are available and encourage companies interested in what we are doing to provide sponsorships throughout 2020 and beyond. You can spread the work about the Hemp Feed Coalition amongst your family, friends, and business associates. You could volunteer on a work group or consider joining our board. And for more information, please follow the group's progress on our LinkedIn and Facebook pages, or visit us on the web at hempfeedcoalition.org. So I would like to, I want to thank everyone at the Midwest Poultry Federation, as well as everyone attending, for your time, attention, and consideration of using hemp as an animal feed ingredient. If you have any questions, please visit us on the web, fill out a contact form where someone will respond to your inquiry as timely as possible.
Okay, Andrew, appreciate your presentation. Let me kind of look here and see on the Q&A right now to see if we have, yeah, I think, let's see, here's a question. I think it's directed to you, Andrew. It basically says, how would approval for animal feed be impacted if CBD got classified by the FDA as a drug?
So,
yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. It would definitely potentially negatively impact using hemp as an animal feed, and when I say that, I mean the flour. The current focus of the Hemp Feed Coalition, before we get to the flour portion of it, which currently is definitely heavily debated, is the seed. The seed is not known to have any levels of THC or CBD, and therefore really doesn't fall under that same argument. So we have a little bit easier road with the seed than we do trying to feed the rest of the plant to an animal.
Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. Nothing's come in right now from that. Great response. So again, Andrew, appreciate your presentation, and we'll try to get to our third presentation, which is going to be a video clip from Emily Metz. Just a little bit about Emily before hopefully we start that video clip. She's a professional communicator, marketer, and strategist, and she likes to say she's been around the barnyard, so to speak. Basically, she's worked with a lot of groups supporting the U.S. dairy, beef, pork, and poultry farmers, and she has been in advocacy positions at USDA, Animal Agriculture Alliance, National Milk Producers Federation. She just recently joined the American Egg Board as their new president and CEO in June of this year. She directs strategy and oversees national programs on behalf of the industry, drive demand for U.S. egg products domestically and abroad. And so she's going to be taking charge of the American Egg Board. So I think we'll try to get Emily's video clip started at the moment.
Hi, I'm Emily Metz, President and CEO of Your American Egg Board. I'd like to thank the Midwest Poultry Federation and the organizing team for allowing me to speak to you today. I have always valued this conference and have in fact attended many times, so I'm sorry we can't be together in person this year as circumstances surrounding COVID prevent us from doing so. But I'm excited to join you today in this new virtual format and know this conference is going to be just as great as it always is. For those of you who don't know, I've been around the barnyard much of my career, starting as a speechwriter for the U.S. Department of Agriculture and moving then on to representing all farmers as head of membership and communications for the Animal Agriculture Alliance. I served as chief of staff for the National Milk Producers Federation before heading to Genus, where I served as global head of corporate communications for our beef, porcine, and dairy genetics divisions. I am truly honored to now be representing America's egg farmers and leading the checkoff on behalf of all of you. I can tell you that we've had a very busy few months at the American Egg Board, and I'm excited to share with you some of the advancements. I know you've been busy too in these unprecedented times, as everybody says. Whatever the circumstances, in good times or in bad, I know that your job of feeding people does not change. America's egg farmers provide our perfect protein, those incredibly nutritious, high-quality eggs that are beloved the world over. And the American Egg Board will continue to nurture and strengthen that global love affair with eggs, helping our farmers grow their businesses and ensuring long-term security and prosperity for our entire industry. So today, I'm excited to share some of the ways we're doing just that, and I'll close with a bit about our future as well. First, some absolutely stellar news on the nutrition front. As you may have heard, last month, in a historic first, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee issued its scientific report and specifically recommended eggs as an important first food for babies, children, and mothers. These recommendations by leading nutrition scientists and physicians will shape the U.S. government's 2020 guidelines for Americans. The report is also classified choline, a nutrient that is crucial for brain development and health, as being underconsumed for Americans. Importantly, eggs are one of the most concentrated sources of choline in the American diet. Needless to say, your American Egg Board has been quite busy sharing this exciting news on television, radio, and news media outlets. These efforts have yielded more than 400 million media impressions, a staggering number. We've also created a toolkit with infographics and other assets for our producers and state organizations to amplify this incredible news. We're just getting started. In the coming weeks, you can expect to see the incredible egg make the rounds on top network programs and lifestyle print media as well. So be sure to stay tuned and tune in. Next up, on the consumer marketing front, I'm thrilled to announce that eggs officially have their own day of the week. Wednesday is now Wegs Day. Similar to Taco Tuesday or Friday Pizza Night, the incredible egg is taking Hump Day to a new level with Wegs Day. This consumer social media program is designed to capture additional meal occasions with great ideas for eggs all day. Wegs Day launched on July 22nd and is making waves on social media platforms with a cast of talented egg characters that sing and dance their way through a catchy music video celebrating eggs all day. Let's take a look.
Wegs Day, Wegs Day, Wegs Day. Take Hump Day to the next level. Wegs Day, Wegs Day, Wegs Day. Have them scrambled sunny side of devil. How do you like your eggs on Wednesday? Show us with hashtag Wegs Day.
Every Wednesday through mid-November, the incredible egg would deliver fun, creative messages from the Wegs Day video, alongside wonderful food ideas across all meal day parts. Please help us spread the word by using hashtag Wegs Day. Lastly, while egg sales at retail have been booming, the other side of our business has been struggling. It's scary to think about, but 35% of our nation's restaurants are currently closed, and many may stay closed forever. We, as America's egg industry, must continue to be a trusted partner to the food service industry, and we've come up with a plan to help them with our perfect protein, the incredible egg. We're taking a three-pronged approach with enhanced partnership support for large chains, resources and tools to take advantage of drive-through and carry-out opportunities, and a new Boosting Breakfast Business program for smaller operators. Major national chains currently drive a large portion of egg servings in food service, and these partnerships are vitally important to us. We held meetings and calls with key national partner accounts in July to present consumer research and promotional concepts designed to help drive traffic back to the breakfast day part. We're also leveraging the Wegs Day opportunity with overwhelming positive feedback, so much so that we're exploring custom Wegs Day programming for several large chains. Smaller operators have sadly been hardest hit by the current situation, so AEB has introduced a support program especially for them, with tools to enhance their breakfast menu, drive traffic, and bring back breakfast featuring what else? Our perfect protein. Lastly, AEB's Incredible Egg Trend series has been inspiring food service and culinary professionals for years by focusing on more aspirational culinary trends. We've created a special edition focusing on capitalizing on off-premise dining, takeout, and delivery opportunities, which we know so many consumers today are enjoying, almost 51%. Together, we're going to get eggs and egg products flowing back into America's restaurants. We're doing our part, so do yours too, and pick up a delicious breakfast for carryout, delivery, or dine-in if it's safe to do so. I wasn't kidding when I said it's been a busy couple of months. We've been trying to manage these new circumstances just as best as we can and take advantage of every opportunity that has been presented to us on behalf of you, our nation's egg farmers. No one can predict the future, but I'm a firm believer that we can prepare for it together. We can plan for the unknowable and have a strategy that enables us to be nimble and adapt to any circumstances or challenges that might come our way, and to turn those challenges into opportunities. I like to call this future-proofing. To future-proof this industry, we're going to have to push the envelope. We're going to have to take some calculated risks, and we're going to have to be open to new ideas and innovation. Together with the American Egg Board's Board of Directors, I've begun drafting a new 5-year strategic plan that will hopefully be something that our entire industry can be proud of. It's something that I'm going to push us to be proactive with, to be forward-thinking, and to really address the needs that may come our industry's way from every angle. I'd like your support and input. Please reach out. Together, I know we can create a plan that takes AEB and our total egg industry to the next level, and that helps to ensure that eggs stay an exciting, essential, and indispensable part of people's lives. Thank you so much for having me today, and to the Midwest Poultry Federation for organizing this session for us to be together virtually. I very much hope that next year we'll be together in person. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Okay, we thank Emily for that presentation, and let me look at the Q&A here slot to see if we have any extra questions that have come in for our two speakers than Emily's, and I don't see it at this moment. So I think we're done a little bit early on this session, this lunchtime learning, and I hope you've gotten some information that you can use in your operation. And then we appreciate all our speakers. And so we thank you for joining, and please express appreciation to our sponsors. And there are several other trainings and workshops and webinars yet this afternoon. And then tonight, I think between 5 and 6 is the chat session where you can go in and chat with others. So we appreciate you joining the session, and have a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you.